Come on by and have a bite at the CrossRoads Diner, the place where your spirit goes when it's time to change direction. Hey everybody, Steve McCurdy here at the CrossRoads Diner, and on with me today is my good friend, longtime friend, Ken Bailey. Ken and I have done a million things together, and we made $1.37 on all of them.
That's right. Most of them legal.
I didn't.
All of them legal. Sorry.
I wasn't aware someone was keeping score. How you doing, Ken?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
I'm great. Listen, I'm trying to get this little podcast started, and the idea here is authenticity, personal authenticity. You know, people all the time are saying, "Look, just be yourself," and I've always thought, okay, I wonder which one of me that is. And so I've always had a little bit of a challenge in kind of trying to understand that. And there's a lot of people that have, kind of anxieties when they are in a group or in a new role. You know, if they're taking on something new, that leads to sometimes imposter syndrome. So what we do here is we kind of go back through the decision-making process, the places where, you think we ask kids all the time, what are you going to be when you grow up? And you know, when they're 5, everybody wants to be a fireman. Mm-hmm. And from the looks of fireman, that's a pretty good choice.
Yeah.
But then, then it changes, and nobody feels like a failure when they decide, no, I think I've decided I want to be a agronomist, or whatever. What, how did that journey go for you when you were a kid? I knew I always wanted to be around a microphone or on a stage, but I really didn't know exactly what that was going to look like. And I knew my parents didn't like that idea. But what about you? I mean, you were around photographers doing amazing things.
Yeah. I got to a ringside seat for some really, really interesting things. I was a pretty shy kid, and but I love telling stories. And
Right.
in fact, one of my friends in elementary, I would tell a story or tell a joke, and he would repeat it, and he became the class clown only because he was doing my material, and I was too shy to do it. So I never, unlike you, I never thought I never felt as a in front of the camera performer, but I just grew up immersed in the idea of storytelling through visual arts, and that never left me.
Yeah. So how did it manifest? You get out of high school where everything's kind of planned. What was the college or the journey after high school? I won't say college because a lot of people went to trade schools. You went to the Air Force at one point. But what was expected of you, and what did you end up doing?
Yeah, I had been accepted. I'd worked on the school newspaper as a photographer, and I'd been accepted to the San Francisco Art Institute for film studies. And I was pretty keen on that. My parents, I'm a recovering Baptist, and so my parents were very insisting on me going to Baylor. And so I'd had a cousin go there a couple of years older than me, and we had other family that had gone there. And it was a great school, beautiful campus, so many good things about it. I didn't want to go there. And it had almost zero RTV or radio, television, film studies. I took some of the only classes we had. In fact, one class we had was studying the War of the Worlds thing that Orson Welles did when he scared. It was the not the film The War of the Worlds, but the
1938 the radio show.
Yeah, we had a 33 1/3 record of that, and so we listened to that and talked about the social impact and I talked to my grandmother about that time, and she thought it was the Germans were invading. They were listening like most people were that night, and it was a very scary, realistic thing. And I was able to get that from my grandmother, who experienced that it was a real deal. But that was about it. So I was working with this amazing photographer there at Baylor named Paul Currier, who was doing all kind of experimental things. And then because my dad was shooting the Houston Oilers football team, he was shooting the coaching film for it. He made good friends with the color announcer, the guy that did the actual broadcast over radio and television, Frank Fallon, who his home station was KWTX in Waco. And so he told my dad that they had an opening if I wanted to apply. And so I rushed right over there, and that really changed my life. That was a huge change in my life, because I saw, while I was there, shortly after I got there, we got our first videotape machine. And always before that had been film, which was my experience, was 16 millimeter film and 35 millimeter film. And so, but finding this new medium was just, we were like some of the background players in a Tarzan movie. We were just all standing around this thing, trying to punch it. And like the opening to 2001: A Space Odyssey, we were like punching at this thing, and how does it work? And you couldn't see through the tape. And because before I could always hold the film up to a light, and I could see frames, and I could see individual images of that. So, but you knew immediately this was the future we were looking at. And turned out, for my life, that turned out to be true. And that became an important part of my life throughout most of my life, was videotape.
Did you, editing, by the time I came into it, which was, a little bit behind you, videotape editing was dubbing. You found the piece that you wanted, and you made a copy, and then you queued it up, and you made, so it was a copying process. The original was never destroyed. But I know that there are some people that actually razor blade edited videotape. Did you guys have experience with that?
I did that with 1/4-inch audio tape, because
me too.
Audio was a big part of my audio for film was part of what I did with the family company. And in fact, they even sent me to Rochester to learn some things, which I didn't do very well, but about film, audio for film, optical tracks and all that, which is pretty technical stuff. But I never cut a video that way. I didn't get to video until we had it was very limited editing, like you're saying. We were butt cutting the scenes together, but there was no physical cutting of the tape or anything. Right. So, but you had the generational loss for years and years, where you either had to go back to the head and start all over again, or make a copy and go down, and then it was generational loss after, and so even on the best quality you could shoot, you were still winding up with a final product that was
at least second generation.
Yeah, at least that would be fortunate if it was second generation.
Right. Yeah, normally it's like third or fourth.
Yeah, that's right.
So, getting away from the tech for just a minute and going back to motivations. So your dad helped you get a job. You went to Baylor.
I did.
And while there, your dad helped you get a job in a field that you kind of had some interest in. By going to WB.
Yeah, I was over the moon to work at a TV station. We had the first moon when I was there. The first unmanned spacecraft landed on the moon, and we were watching that. And it was an exciting time in America. It was an exciting time in film. It was. I just loved it. In fact, I loved it so much that it really negatively impacted my time at Baylor. I spent way too much time there working to sign off every night till 2 a.m. And my roommate was a director there, and it was just I was in love with it, instantly in love with the whole thing. And we got to do more and more. Waco in those days, we'd have a Saturday night story that would be about, literally, this is true, about putting in a traffic light on one of the main thoroughfares. And I also learned an interesting thing there, that I would always carry a still camera with me, and I was going home from work, and there was I ran upon this house on fire, and so I started taking pictures, and and the firemen showed up and all that stuff. And I went back to Baylor to the lab, and I processed the film, and I took it down to the newspaper downtown because I had these great pictures.
Right.
And I learned an incredible lesson, Steve. The night editor, looked at my pictures and said, "Hey, these are really good, but nobody died." What? He said, "Yeah, nobody died." He said, "If somebody died, would pay you for them and would run the story." And I thought, wow, what a cold lesson that was. That
right.
No matter how good my news photography was, nobody died, so my pictures weren't accepted. So, that's stayed with me.
So your next career, the cynicism of hard-boiled journalism, and don't spend time unless somebody's bleeding.
Yeah.
How did you get into the Air Force? Because I know that was kind of next.
Right. Well, I'd come back to Houston. I was going to University of Houston at this point, and I was working at Channel 13, still in television, still loving it, and still having incredible opportunities for an 18-year-old kid, 19-year-old kid. And I was taking a class I was taking a number of classes at University of Houston, and I was in this one class that was so stinking boring, and I dropped it. And not thinking about the fact that I wasn't carrying enough hours to be full-time, because I was working full-time and I was going to school full-time. Right. And when I dropped that class, I got immediately, I was pretty high on the draft list, and I got a draft letter telling me I was going to be drafted into the Army. So didn't want to do that. What I wanted to do was go into Armed Forces Radio and Television, because that would, again, I thought that would further my career. And so I, armed with this ridiculous letter from this general saying that I was the head of our station had written for me. I thought it was all the skids were greased, and I was going right into, me and Geraldo were going to head to Vietnam and start taking pictures. And turns out that because of the classes I'd had at Baylor and all that, the Air Force had me program to go right into the medical as an OR tech, working in the operating room for 4 years, which I did, which was fascinating. I loved it. Great people, learned so much. But I was fortunate enough that I was stationed almost the entire time in Austin, Texas, which was only a 3-hour ride from Austin to Houston. So I could go home and work on the weekends if I wasn't on call. And so I continued to work with the family business often, especially during football season when we were shooting a lot of football.
So, if I'm understanding this, you had a desire to work in radio, TV, and film.
I did.
You ended up going to Baylor and tried to find a way to at least get a part-time job doing that.
I did.
From Baylor, you ended up at U of H, and I'm assuming that was because you were working so many hours and stuff like that. It was a grades issue that you probably had to then.
No, no. Actually, it was a number of hours. You would think, knowing me, you do, it would be a grades issue, but it was actually just the number of hours I was taking. You had to take a full load to be exempt from the draft, and I because I dropped and it was fairly close to it was. I didn't have to miss the draft by too many times to make it to the next semester to go ahead, because I was real close to getting a degree there.
Okay. But you tried at least to stay within what you wanted for yourself.
Yeah. Oh,
and
absolutely.
The military being what they are, their decision did not consider your desires. But you learned stuff there, and
I did.
But you did 4 full years in the Air Force.
I did.
Wow.
Well, less 3 months. I got out 3 months early. Nixon was president, and I got out 3 months early.
Yeah, I got out a year and a half earlier than I wanted to, for the same reason. It must have been about the same time that we went back and hit Houston together. Yeah. Which was interesting that we didn't meet each other for another 30 years.
It is. Yeah.
But when you came back out of the Air Force, what your interest stayed. It didn't move to medical.
No, the way one informed the other was I did start doing more and more work for some of the hospitals at the medical center and that sort of thing, because I knew my way around the operating room, and so I knew
doing what were you doing?
Filming. We did training films for Memorial Systems. I did several films for them, and either in training or marketing. They were marketing a lot to Mexico and South America out of those systems. That was trying to get folks to come up here. It was a different time, but trying to get wealthy people to come. I guess that's still true. They're trying to get wealthy people to come to the medical center. So yeah, so some of my work was informed by the 4 years. I didn't need 4 years of training to do those couple of films. But but I came right back into the family business, still working films. And but my dad had purchased this multimedia programmer to do 8, 10, 12, 16 slide projectors would be projected onto a very wide space, and we would do shows. So my storytelling, from the time I was 4, when I fell in love with television, till this time, I was still telling stories. It was still visual arts, and then shortly after that, with some real success, real thankful for the great clients. I was just so blessed. I've been so blessed with great clients all along. It would allow me to help them tell their stories. I went into videotape as soon as I could, and the videotape was underwritten by one of my clients, which was Red Adair and Boots and Coots, who told me if I would get the equipment, they would hire me to do what I'd been wanting to do for a long time. So that took me off into video production for the next 25 years.
And this way, you got to videotape and film fires where nobody had to die.
Yeah. Never thought of that. Very good. Yes, that's exactly right.
But stuff did get blown up. So, there is that.
We blew up a lot of stuff, which was pretty exciting too. Anytime we were at a convention, our booth was always the one where everybody was to see all the stuff getting blown up and fires. And it was pretty exciting. And I got to go on a few with CBS's 48 Hours. I took 48 Hours crew to one of our blowouts in Louisiana, and the 48-hour thing was fascinating because I'd gotten them there, and they one of the ways they mediate the fire, and one of the ways they control the fire, the blowout, not the fire so much, but they actually douse the fire, and this one wasn't on fire, so they wanted to leave and go back to New York, and I had to convince them that it was more dangerous, which is true. It was much more dangerous when it wasn't on fire, because when it's on fire, it can't get more on fire. It's controlled that way. But when it's not on fire, it can blow at any time. So it's much more risky for the blowout not to be on fire, and gas and rocks and all kind of stuff are coming out of the hole. So, and we kept them there for enough to get a pretty good story out of it on 48 Hours. But, that was oh man, I love my time with those guys. They were just so much fun to work with. So, yeah.
That's great. Okay. So, where we are is that we're talking about people at decision points in their life when they've got to kind of, particularly if it's going to be a major change. In your case, you knew what you wanted, you knew what you were interested in, and except for the 4 years in the Air Force, you were able to kind of finagle a job that was in that area. But knowing you the way that I do now, I know that documenting what's going on and helping a company tell their story is a consistent job. It's a day job. It works. You can find those clients. But you had this yearning to tell human stories.
Yeah.
And to tell life stories. Your faith informs some of that. When did that outvote the paycheck enough for you to just to step into those areas?
Well, they really crossed, Steve. I did a magazine series, a four times a year quarterly report for Exxon, and they were so kind to me. They let me do human interest stories. We bought the rights to Daddy's Home, and we got to go when the Exxon was so great to their employees that were called up. There were reservists that were called up and sent to Iraq, and so we went in and interviewed the families when Dad was coming home or Mom was coming home, and we went to the airport and we did pre-interviews with the family, and we got to see the whole thing, and then we got to run this whole montage of Daddy's Home stuff. It was a lot of tears in that one from both sides of the camera, and then with Exxon, I got to do all kind of things like that. One of the things that I did to make things happen was there's a company in Houston that's called SCI, Service Corporation International, and I decided I wanted them for a client, so I went to them and told them that I'd written their name on the wall, and what can I do to, and I was willing to work, to do a film or two for free, because I really decided they were a client I wanted, and they had started not very far from where I grew up, and we did a whole series of films. They had a lot to do with end of life situations and burials and all that kind of thing. And so, but it was a time when we did a whole series of videos that they would play for people dealing with grief. And so a lot of my work was never very engineering oriented. It always had a human interest story, like you said. That was what interested me. And we had some, you measure success different ways, and certainly those things that informed where you got to tell the real story. The cameras are so. The football players used to say, "The big eye don't lie." The camera sees your eyes; it sees into you, and it's very difficult for a politician or a large, a really experienced businessman even to really spin stories. When I would do interviews with some of the heads of industry, they would usually take about 8 to 10 minutes just telling me their boilerplate, their corporate story, and I would just have to wait there to get to something real, and that's when the interview would really start. Because I would sometimes they would say things, and I know there was, and a couple of times I'm surprised I kept my job, but I would say, you don't really believe that, do you? And then they would defend what they had said, and then it all started, and then you could see it in their eyes. The story started to get very real. So
yeah, a lot of those stories are, they're not untrue. They're just legalized. Legal has, legal has
well
given.
Said, yes.
Here's the language that you can say.
That's
but
right.
It wasn't the story. They still had the passion for the true story.
Absolutely.
But they couldn't deliver that sanitized language authentically because it didn't tell the story.
And it's 100 times worse today. I'm so thankful I'm not trying to do that now, because it's so much worse today than it was back then.
Right.
But even then, they were very cautious to what they said. So I had to try to pierce that if it was going to get real. And we were, we had some success in that area.
Well, this is a good angle. This is a good little tangent to go on, because it actually it's on point to me. Those executives who were hemmed in by limitations were not being themselves. They were being the identity the company required them to be at that point in time.
That's right. And
your point is that not only could you see it, but you felt like anybody looking at the footage could tell that.
Absolutely true. Absolutely right.
And we're at a place in life now where it's very hard to believe anything that's going on, because it's very rare to see authenticity,
right?
To have something to compare to.
Yeah. We've seen so many lies that we don't know what truth looks like so much anymore. It used to be very clear. And and people are so trained and so, so many people have lied so long and so much that they've gotten good at it. So,
and they may not even know that, what they're saying.
I think often they don't. Yeah, I think you're right. I think often they don't. I think they start to believe the story themselves sometimes.
Right.
That's really unfortunate. That's why the faith-based work that I do is so much more interesting to me, because, the truth there is, there's there's still people that are, telling stories. When I was a kid, my mom would never let me say lie or even fib. It was all, did you tell me a story? Did you, that was, that equated to lies. Telling a story was the same as lying. And it's just been real interesting in my life.
I grew up with, our mothers were sisters, apparently.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how that telling a story and the lie of that became my truth later on, that, telling a story was all about truth to me. And that was a transition.
It takes me back to, and I can't remember who said this, and you may, and if you do, please tell me, but they were talking about when film went from black and white to color. And this, and it might have been Hitchcock, I don't know who it was, said, color is realistic, but black and white is more real, more like life.
Yeah.
And it's,
people confuse me with Hitchcock all the time. So I understand your dilemma.
Well, I didn't say that you said it. Oh, man.
Especially our profile.
Yeah. Oh, goodness. So, young people that are graduating from high school, graduating from college now, what kind of counsel would you give to them about the temptations that they've got from all sides to make a bunch of money, the temptations that they've got to go be well known, be an influencer, serve their egos? What counsel? You've got granddaughters and a grandson coming up, right, all of whom are incredible human beings that I've had the chance to get to know, and who do a remarkable job of being authentic. I know that you're not going to take a bow for that you're going to give your daughter and her husband a lot of credit for that, but they have the confidence to be themselves. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, it's nurture and nature for those kids. There's some DNA stuff, the environment. They were, I made a covenant with myself, with my daughter, that she wasn't really aware of, that I would never lie to her. If she, no matter what she asked me, I just prayed that she never asked me certain questions. And so far I've kind of gotten away with that. Now she's of an age where she can handle the truth, more than, the folks from A Few Good Men. But one thing that really hurt me, that, it changed something, is I was a huge Roy Rogers fan when I was a kid. I mean, huge. And we were shooting back as I was a kid, I got to go behind the scenes at the Houston Rodeo, Fast Stock Show and Rodeo is what it was called then. And Roy Rogers was sitting on a fence, a wooden fence, and he was doing some kind of piece into a camera. And there were cue cards. And he was saying things, and it just about crushed me. I thought, how stupid is this guy that was my hero, that he has to read? I knew everything he was saying. I could have done it off. I knew all the things that he said, and he was reading cue cards, and the cue cards really, really affected me. And got over it. And he got back to being my hero for a while, but I never forgot that there was a phoniness about that I thought he was, in theater, I know you get that. A lot of people have asked Patty, my wife, who's an actress, do you just make up the lines, as you go along? And and there's so much programming in our world, more now than ever. And for a young person to really be interested in authenticity of themselves, their own calling, what they're, why they're here and what they're here for. I think it's a very slippery slope now. I think it's so much harder than when I was a kid so many more people are lying to you. There's so much spin. AI is going to be the real spin doctor of all. The mega instead of MAGA, but either one applies. But one thing that bothers me about kids today is that worries me is this thing that if you do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life.
Yeah.
I understand that. I've certainly lived that way often. I've been so fortunate to live that way sometimes, Steve. But sometimes you got to work to get to that place or to get to those, and then watch for the opportunities. Listen, for the phone call. Watch, really be aware of, is this something I could do? And then have the courage to step up and do it. And I don't know about you, but I never started the first day on any job. And I've had a few. I've been real blessed not to have a whole lot of different jobs, but I never went into a job on the first day, from dishwasher at Baylor and all those things that I did in the Air Force, that I thought I knew. I thought I was, I couldn't figure this out at all. It was way over my head. I was so far in over my head, I couldn't figure it out. And within just a few weeks, I could do it. And I could list every job I've had and talk about those first few days. And you can go into those first few days, and it can shut you down, or you can start lying about how much you know, or trying to spin, or you can also blame other people for why you're not successful. And that's such an easy thing to do, that to come up with all these reasons why you're not getting to do the thing that you love, and you have to work in this terrible job that makes me feel like less than person.
Right.
But yeah, you gotta have integrity. I think that's what's missing so often. I think everybody's born with it. I think everybody has it. It just gets, it kind of gets like an old pair of jeans that get washed over and over. Sometimes the integrity wears out of you if you go on too many rocks and get beat up too much on a rock on a lake so much that the integrity leaves. But if you can hang on to your integrity and keep it in your story, if your story can hinge on that integrity, you will be able to do things you love, and you will never work a day in your life. But it doesn't come immediately. It's not given to you. You're going to have to watch for it. And then when those opportunities come, you're going to have to jump on them like my grandmother would say, a duck on a June bug. You got to move, bam, and take advantage of that moment. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, And I so appreciate what you're doing, man.
Thank you.
I think you're doing a great thing for folks with this program.
And sometimes what you want is to get you to the place to make a discovery about something else that you want more, that you just didn't know about.
That's right. So true.
Yeah. I have a Roy Rogers story of my own. I was 4 years old. I was 4 years old, and I just finished watching a Roy Rogers thing, and I went into the kitchen, and my mom and my stepfather were in there making dinner and things. And I said, Daddy, sometimes when we can, I want you to take me to Texas. And he said, son, we live in Texas. I said, not this Texas, the one with Roy Rogers. I didn't want this authentic Texas.
Oh man, that is so great. Cause it's true. It was Camelot, it was, you're so right. It was a mystical place. And you ran in, later when I was working in New York as a very young, late teenager, I would run into people that would ask me about Texas, and it was still that mythical kind of Camelot place for people all over the world. That's
now,
changed. But,
it's the butt of the jokes all over the world in some cases. But if you live in Texas, and if you are a lover of Texas, you understand that it's, it was a country at one time, and it became a state, but it's really still its own country.
That's right.
In many, many ways. Mm-hmm. And magnanimous about some of it, arrogant about others. It's, it's just like every other place in the world. It's proud of what it is.
That's right.
Even
though they don't, unlike Texas, they don't really have the the rights to be so proud like Texans do, but
right.
I forgive that. So
yeah, I wasn't born in Texas, but I got there as quick as I could.
Yeah.
That kind of thing. Well, thank you for sharing, elements of your story with us. The message that I want to plant, the seed that I want to plant in the world, is that what you want is, and what is driving you is coming from a very deep place. And until you pursue it, you won't be satisfied. It may not be where you want to end up. It might not be what you're really good at. I have, as a director, both of us have cast people in shows who shouldn't be allowed to buy tickets to shows. And it's not their field and it's not what they should do, but they need to go through that process to kind of, learn what they are good at, what they are valuable, and where they can make a contribution, and what feeds their spirit. Because what feeds your spirit is very, very important. And this planet's not going to be all that it can be, and our society's not going to be all that it can be, unless a person is doing their best, being their best self. And you can't be any better than who it is that you are. That's your highest calling. I
love that. Yeah, that's great. Well said.
And so this is a journey and encouragement to find out who you are, be that person fully, and make a difference in every life that you touch. And thank you for helping us kind of wander through some case studies of that. And we'll probably have you back another time to talk about things like I Flunked Sunday School and some of your other books that you've written that are wonderful collections of characters on a faith struggle, faith journey. Because, the idea of do what you love, you'll never work a day in your life, that sounds really, really good. But as you are well aware, there's a lot of work in doing what you love.
Yes, absolutely.
There's a lot of struggle in being in phase and out of phase with that, and that I think parallels the struggle with how in phase and out of phase you are with yourself, with your intention, with your spirit, and with your purpose. So thanks for joining us today in the CrossRoads Diner. If we can
loved it.
If we can send you a slice of pie, we'll work our way around doing that.
I love that too. Always great talking with you, Steve.
On behalf of my buddy Ken Bailey, I'm Steve McCurdy for the CrossRoads Diner. We'll talk to you next week. The diner that stands at the crossroads of life, where your spirit goes when it might be time to change your direction. Look for the CrossRoads Diner videos on YouTube and our podcast on your favorite streaming service. Fresh every Monday and Thursday.